And just thank you for joining us today on 10 things you need to build for a successful data career. It's lessons I've put together over things I've learned over the past 30 years of my data career. And I just wanted to share those with you. This is kind of a new type of content that we're looking at doing. And let me just briefly take a moment and share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that? I'm not hearing anything, and I don't see the chat. So I've got team from Enterprise DNA monitoring behind me. And so if anybody has a problem in terms of seeing or hearing, just please put that in the chat and we'll work through that. So everything good to go? So as I mentioned, this is a new type of content for us. And as we've talked to our members and talked to people in my network, I've learned there are a lot of people who are either interested in getting into a data career or in a data career and are looking to advance, looking to build their skills. And so what we wanted to do was just provide some perspective on things you need to look out for in terms of building the foundation of your career, advancing in your career, and then reaching back and helping others in their career as well. So I want to start with a story. It goes back to August of 1985. And I was in college. I was in my junior year at the University of Virginia. And this was a day when I was sitting in the first day of Professor Stern's Introduction to Econometrics class. And I was excited about this class. I'd heard it was one of the toughest courses in the department. I'd been interested in majoring in economics for a while. And I'm typically kind of a middle of the classroom guy. But in this case, I was excited. I sat in the front row, and he walked into a blank blackboard, greeted the class, and just wrote these three letters on the board: DGP. And he said, "Does anybody know what that stands for?" And the class was silent. And he said, "This is the data generating process, and that everything you see in the world and every piece of data that you study is generated by a data generating process. And you never see that process. There's no way to reveal that process for certain. But the tools I'm going to teach you in this class are going to give you a glimpse of what that process looks like. And in doing so, you're going to be able to understand the world and the way things work in ways that people who don't know these tools and these techniques are never going to understand." And I just sat there and thought, that's what I want to do for a living. That just seemed like the greatest thing I'd ever heard. And I remember thinking, I don't know who does that for a living. I don't know how you get into that field, but that's what I want to do. And I remember talking to him afterwards and starting to learn about econometrics and data science. We didn't call it that back in 1985, but that's fundamentally what it was. And learning about careers and paths to get into that. And for the past 35 years, that's what I've done. And it's been a remarkably interesting and satisfying career. And so I don't really want to talk much about myself and what I've done. I just kind of put this up here to show over the course of that 35 years, I've just done a lot of different things related to data analysis, data science. And then I've also probably for about half my career been on the managerial side, overseeing data analysts, data scientists, financial analysts. And then I guess it was about 5 years ago, I was deputy director of a large office within the U.S. federal government, overseeing about close to 175 people and about $50 million. And I just got to the point where I really just missed getting my hands dirty with data and working on my own projects. And so I took a voluntary demotion about 4 levels down to a team of 6 people working back on hands-on data projects, and never regretted it. Really enjoyed working with that team. And from that, it led to my involvement in Power BI, Power Platform, and ultimately to the position I'm in now at Enterprise DNA. So the question is, why a career in data? What's so great and interesting about this? And I think there are 3 things that jump out to me. And the first one is this quote from John Tukey, who is one of the giants of modern statistics. And I remember seeing this quote. He said, "The best thing about being a statistician is you get to play in everyone's backyard." And that is absolutely true. That over the course of my career, I spent 2 weeks hanging out of a Coast Guard helicopter, um, gathering data on beach use in Puerto Rico. I've been diving in the Florida Keys to validate an economic model of seagrass recovery. I've testified in court as an expert witness. I have worked at the command center of natural disasters. I've done just some fascinating stuff, and it's not individual to me. That I think if you talk to anybody who has been in the data field for a long time, they've gotten to do some fascinating stuff, because the skills that you bring to bear are things that everybody needs. And there are just all kinds of situations where somebody needs a statistician or a data analyst or a data scientist. And so you really do get to play all over the world in all these different backyards. And it's beyond fascinating. And I read something a couple of weeks ago online about from Waleed here, is a friend of mine and the co-founder of Stellify BI, which is a top tier business intelligence firm in London. And he really talked about kind of the current data boom and how data is really comparable to the kind of the oil boom at the turn of the century. That being able to extract that data, that there are so many companies and organizations and governments that are just drowning in data and don't know how to extract meaning from what they've got. And the ability to do that and to basically pull that data out of the ground like oil and refine it and make it into something useful is remarkably in demand. And it's something that provides enormous opportunity for people with those skills. And so the fact that you're here today, says that you're either kind of involved in this world or interested in becoming involved in this world. And I will tell you that the opportunities are just almost endless. There's huge demand. There is demand for all different sorts of skills. And it's just exciting to think where this is all going to go. That the technology gets better and better and more accessible every month. And so, kind of just looking back 3 or 4 years to where we are now is a huge leap. And 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, I can't even imagine kind of what the field is going to look like. And then, as I have here a chance to see the unseeable and understand the world better, this goes back to Professor Stern and the data, excuse me, the data generating process. That you really do get the chance to understand the world in a way that, to me, is absolutely fascinating. I remember working on a consulting project for the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh, and they were having a problem with renewals. And we spent about 6 months studying everything about renewals in the museum. We analyzed historical data, we did focus groups, we collected survey data, and we built a complex econometric model of renewal. And what we found was fascinating, that we thought it would be a whole series of factors that played into the renewal decision. And when you kind of strip everything away and looked at what the DGP behind renewal decisions was, it was one variable. And that variable was, if you step foot in the museum once over the course of the past year, you renewed, and if you didn't, you let your membership lapse. And it was just fascinating to see that, in some sense, many times the estimation of the DGP leads to some very complex calculations and interpretations. And in this case, it turned out to be so remarkably simple. And to me, it was just a fascinating revelation, and one that the museum was then able to use to really drive much higher renewals. And it's always interesting to me when you run those sorts of analyses and you understand the world in a different way than you did when you started, that you get counterintuitive results and you see the impact of those and actually play out in real life decisions. So these are all things that fascinate me, and I hope you as well. So there's always a lot of talk about the different positions within data. And this is from the Digital Analytics Association. And I think it's a pretty good comparison. You see a lot of these different comparisons. And I frankly don't put a huge amount of stock in any of them, because at least in the organizations that I've been in, there's not these bright lines between analysts and data scientists and architect, that it's kind of a catch as catch can, that you kind of do what's needed when it's needed. And so, there are times I know in the government where I was doing more analyst type work of building reports and dashboards, doing data storytelling, primarily descriptive analysis. And then there were other times where I was doing a lot of advanced statistical work, a lot of predictive modeling, and kind of building and evaluating models. And so it kind of ebbed and flowed depending on the needs of the organization. So I think that typically what you see in the distinction between these is, one is an education requirement, which is typically data scientist requires a master's or a PhD, whereas analyst is typically just a bachelor's or potentially not even that. There are also the big divide is often in terms of kind of advanced statistical capabilities, and that's a demarcation between analyst and data scientist, which there's some validity to that, but there's also a lot of analysts I know who are very strong statistically. So I would just kind of look at these as not really two distinct jobs, but kind of a continuum that kind of moves back and forth over time as need dictates. This is a cartoon that I've always found funny, but I think there's a lot of truth to it, and it points to something that I think is really important and is going to be a big theme in what I talk about today, which is, it says, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. And in the bottom panel, the thing that jumps out to me, and I think about a lot, is everybody in this field has different goals and objectives. And the job you want, even if you're a data analyst or a data scientist, looks very different depending on the specific field you're in, depending on the specific skill sets you have, and a lot of other factors. And so, really keeping in mind kind of what is the career that you want and what does that look like, and gearing your learning, your training, your career strategy to that end goal. And it may very well be that you don't know what that, you don't know what the job you want is. And that's largely where I found myself in my career. I just kind of wanted to do interesting things and then, kind of move on when those were no longer interesting. But I think it's always important, even if that's your goal, to keep that in mind, and we'll kind of see how that plays out in the training that we talk about. So in summarizing kind of the lessons of these 30 plus years, I broke it up into 10 things you need to build. And the first one is technical skills. And really 1, 2, and 3 could have been in any order. That I really look at them as the kind of the legs on the stool or the foundation on which everything else is built. But we'll start with technical. That's a lot of what we at Enterprise DNA focus on. And a lot of it is about learning to use tools. But one of the points here is to be flexible about the tools you choose. That the key really is learning to use those tools to solve a wide range of problems. I see a lot of back and forth on, LinkedIn about, Tableau versus Power BI or Python versus R. And I, personally, I'm a Power BI guy. I happen to like what it can do, and I like its strengths kind of match up with the type of work that I both like and want and need to do. But I don't get that hung up on it. That really what you're looking for is tools that let you solve problems. And in thinking about kind of, to me, what a full stack of tools looks like for a data analyst or data scientist, I'm going to say -1 here because I'm going to talk about the one remaining after on another slide. But Excel is kind of a foundational skill and tool. I think you can take it too far. I see people doing things in Excel that they should never be doing in Excel. I kind of liken it to, somebody trying to build an entire house with a Swiss Army knife. You can do it, and in some respects it's impressive, but it's not a good idea. And there are just things for which Excel is not well suited, and there are better tools on this list. But for kind of all-purpose Swiss Army knife, as I say, it's fantastic. The next thing is, we've really invested kind of heavily in Microsoft Power Platform, particularly Power BI and the ETL component of that, and the data modeling, data visualization. That I think sometimes tools like Power BI get undersold as visualization tools, but they've really become powerful analytic tools as well. And for really huge data sets and for really complex analysis, you need more than that. But you can do a lot just within Power BI. SQL is definitely a foundational skill. And going back to the Power Platform, we've been very focused on Power BI, but Power Apps and Power Automate are becoming increasingly important. And we're really looking to, kind of expand our offerings to give folks capabilities in that full platform, because that's going to become more and more important as time goes on. Microsoft's investing a huge amount in those second two, Power Apps and Power Automate, and integrating those very tightly. And so learning to use that full platform, I think, is going to become increasingly important. SQL is just a great foundational skill that Matthew Roach from Microsoft has an article about Roach's maxim that I've talked about a lot in some of the training I've done, which basically says you want to push your data processing and transformation as close to the source as possible. So in Power BI, instead of doing things in DAX, you want to push them to Power Query. And instead of doing them in Power Query, if possible, you want to push them to SQL. And so kind of learning that full kind of upstream path is really valuable. And then Python or R, the tools listed can get you a long way, but for really large data sets and complex analyses, languages like Python and R will just make it much, much easier. You can do in one of those for kind of complex statistical analysis in 2 or 3 lines what it might take you 50, 60, or 70 lines to do within Power BI. And so the integration of the two, and whether you choose, Python or R, really depends, I think, largely on how much of your orientation is statistical versus kind of general analysis and visualization. Python is broader and more flexible. I think R is stronger in statistics. But both can do a lot of the same things. And so that to me is kind of the full tool stack. But you can be very effective without that complete stack. And I would definitely warn against trying to master everything at once. That's too big for anybody to bite off. And I quite honestly don't know anybody, with one exception, who really has pretty strong mastery of that entire stack. That is a lot to learn, and it changes rapidly over time. And so, I think kind of looking at that full stack as a goal, but not as a realistic expectation. But building steadily over time. That I think if you master a few of those tools and then kind of add to your knowledge, kind of steadily each day, you can get pretty close to that stack. Two traps to avoid, and I see this a lot, and I've fallen into these myself. The first one is too much focus on passive learning. That there's a lot of good content out there. I think we have a lot of great content. There are a lot of other organizations and individuals that put terrific content out on the internet, in video, in blog form. But watching videos and reading blogs is inherently passive, and particularly videos. And in some respects, the more skilled and better the instructor is, the more passive you can become. You can just look and say, okay, that looks simple. I understand exactly what they're doing. And then you sit in front of the computer yourself and you're like, I have no idea what to do. And I think probably all of us have experienced that at some point. So you've really got to augment that passive learning with active learning, in terms of taking the lessons of the videos and the blogs and trying to build projects, and whether it's reports or or models or dashboards that encapsulate the learning that you've been doing, but really put it in your hands to make sure that you understand it and can implement it yourself. And the other trap is building skills only for your current job. That I think, kind of looking at at Power BI, I know in the past for me, there were certain types of reports, financial reports, and particularly HR reports, that were critical in my previous job. And once I learned how to build those, my skills really started to stagnate, because that was what I needed for those reports. And I wasn't progressing. The reports themselves were really good. They were doing what they needed to do. But it was a static set of skills needed to produce those. And so the analogy I like to think here is mixed martial arts, that learning to fight in a variety of styles, kind of stretching beyond what's needed for your current job, and taking on, whether it's through a user forum or data challenges, learning temporal versus spatial, categorical versus quantitative, descriptive versus predictive, particularly if you have a strong IT department and a really shiny, nice data warehouse run by a really good database administrator, you're probably going to be getting data to analyze that is really clean and well prepped. And it's really valuable to learn basically how to work with really messy, dirty data. And so, kind of forcing yourself to build those skills outside your current job is very critical, I think. The second thing is business knowledge. And this again, I don't want to say is number two. It's kind of 1A, 1B, and 1C. And I think back to, I have the wisdom of Professor Wood here, and Professor William Wood was my undergraduate advisor, and he was a professor of macroeconomics, and I really, really enjoyed his class and got to know him, and would talk with him at times about, what courses to take, and he would ask me, kind of about, where I was headed. And I remember a conversation very clearly with him one time where he said, "What are you interested in studying?" And I said, "Well, I really like your macroeconomics class, and I'd be interested in studying macroeconomics." And he said, he kind of paused, and he was like, "Well," he's like, "I got to be honest with you." He said, "There are only 6 people in the world who are doing anything interesting in macroeconomics, and the rest of us are just trying to prove whether those 6 people are right or not." And he said, "Unless you're one of those 6 people, that's not a field that's going to provide a lot of interest and satisfaction for you." But he said, because everybody's working on the same problems with the same data in the same context. But he said microeconomics, on the other hand, really gives you an opportunity to build a specialty of your own and, build at the intersection of technical and business knowledge. So, kind of going back to the Power BI analogy, that if you say my interest is DAX, unless you're Marco Russo or Alberto Ferrari or Greg Deckler or Matt Allington, you're probably not going to make a real great career out of just DAX. Those guys have done it, but there aren't a ton of people who their career is DAX. And in the same way, what Professor Wood was saying about macroeconomics, but if you take and really learn DAX and then say, okay, I'm going to take that, and at the intersection of that, I'm going to apply it to human resources, or I'm going to apply it to healthcare implementation, or supply chain analytics, or logistics. That then is something where you can really build an expertise and a niche, and really build a career where there's going to be demand, where you are going to be at the forefront of expertise in that particular intersection of those topics. And he was exactly right. And for me, it ended up being analytics and environmental, and specifically a field called natural resource damage assessment, which looked at when there were environmental disasters like oil spills or chemical spills, what was the damage that was caused to the public resources, and what was the compensation needed to basically make the public and the environment whole for that injury. And in the intersection of those two things, there weren't a lot of people who knew both the analytics and the business side of that. And so it ended up being a really fascinating career, and one that provided a lot of opportunity. And I think that is really true of the intersection of any kind of in-depth business knowledge and technical knowledge, and kind of strong general analytic skills. What else I hear in terms of, if you happen to work for an employer that is really progressive, is really forward thinking, and offers details and rotational assignments, I would advise to jump at that opportunity and to expand your business knowledge in as many areas as you can, even if it's not an area that you would necessarily think is going to be a career that you'd want to pursue. And I've taken a number of details into fields that I knew were not my long-term interest, but were great opportunities to add to my business knowledge. And particularly, at the agency I worked at, they had a really outstanding leadership development program. And the people in that program would get the opportunity to do 4 to 6 month details to basically wherever they wanted. Could be within the agency, it could be outside the agency. A number of people went and did details to Google. And so you kind of had, we joked were kind of the Willy Wonka golden tickets to do whatever you wanted for your career in those details. And I would get questions from people who were in there about, well, what should I do with my detail slots? And one of the things I always advised was to take one of those tickets and use it to gain business knowledge of the financial center of your organization. Even if you're not a budget or financial person, kind of learning how money moves in an organization, how budgets are funded, how resources are allocated, that is common to every organization. And as an analyst, learning how to analyze that type of data, and particularly within your organization, their specific data, will really help make you invaluable. That either you'll work directly with that financial center in terms of doing that analysis, or you'll better understand for your own office and organization kind of how those decisions are made, and help them better be able to plan and strategize. And so that is something that if you get the opportunity to do, I would absolutely grab it. So number 3 is communication skills. And this is the third leg of the stool. And I saw there was a great video on Galen Holland, who is one of our enterprise DNA experts and is also the author of the Absent Data YouTube channel. It's really excellent. It's a lot of analytical content, but also a lot of good career content. And he did one on the top tools for data science. And number 1 was PowerPoint. And I remember seeing that and I was like, really, PowerPoint? Like not Python, not Excel, not R, not Power BI, PowerPoint. And the point he was making, which in retrospect, I do agree with, which is that if you can't communicate your results clearly, the quality of your analysis doesn't matter. That if you could do the best analysis in the world, but if you can't convey what you've done and what the results are and what the implications of those results are in terms of recommended paths of action, nothing else matters. And so being able to use a tool like PowerPoint, and I think he was kind of using PowerPoint as a proxy for communication skills. That really is kind of ultimately foundational to everything else. And it's something that in my previous job, we used to actually have a part of the interview process where we had candidates do a 20-minute presentation on a project of their choice. And we said, it doesn't have to be something that's related to what we do. In fact, it's better if it's not. That the less we know about it, the better, because we wanted to be in the position of a non-expert audience and see how well somebody could take a complex project that they'd worked on and explain it to us as non-experts, get us to understand not only what they did, but why it was important and what the implications of that were. And that is an essential skill, and one that really can be learned and practiced. And in your circle, you're going to have people, whether it's friends or family or your spouse or partner, who doesn't really know anything about the substance of what you're doing, and they can be a great audience and sounding board when you practice this and say, okay, at the end, was it clear? Did you understand? What didn't you understand? And particularly, one of the things I think to really watch out for is tone. And I put this quote in here because this was a comment we got back on the on Galem's recent Python course. And I thought it really pointed out something very important and valuable, which is that one of the skills in talking to particularly non-expert audiences is not talking over their head, but also not talking down to them. And this person was really making the point that he did a great job kind of hitting that middle tone of being kind of welcoming and understanding that you've not done this before, but not making you feel dumb for not having done it. And I just thought it was an important point, and that tone and the ability to move between audiences is really just an essential part of this. And I think one of the best communicators I've ever met was our head of research and development. And I'd seen her talk to third graders, and I'd seen her talk to members of Congress. And maybe in your mind, there's not a lot of difference between those two, but um, it was amazing to me how she could effectively communicate to both of those groups as well as PhD scientists equally well. And that is really just such a valuable thing to learn to do. So the next thing is portfolio. So you've been working on your technical skills, your business skills, and your communication skills. How do you represent those? And the the key here is developing a portfolio that portrays those skills in the best possible way. And one of the things that comes to mind is the advice always given to screenwriters, which is show, don't tell. And the other thing is focus on outcomes, not activities. Um, Oftentimes, when people talk about their skills, they talk about what they do. And to me, that's not really the point, nor relevant, nor the best way of representing your skill set to a prospective employer or a partner, um, or just the larger data community. What you want to focus on is outcomes. What are the tangible impacts that your work had? And I think this gets to oftentimes also the reports themselves. And we see this a lot in the data challenges, that people will submit a report that has a lot of slicers and it has a lot of filters and a lot of visuals, and it's busy, but it doesn't focus on outcomes. It doesn't focus on, okay, what is this data telling you? What impact does this have? What do you as the analyst want me to do with this? And I think both in your representation of your skills and in the analyses you build, you're not a passive player in this process. That in analysis, when you do a thorough analysis, you should have opinions about, okay, what is the data telling me, and what do I think somebody looking at that should do with it? And representing that in your portfolio and your reports, I think, is absolutely essential. And so you want to build a polished portfolio that represents the best examples of that work. And here's where I'll go a little bit into in the sales mode, in terms of the enterprise DNA challenges are geared exactly for this purpose. That every month what we do is provide a real business oriented topic, and it mimics an actual business situation. That in every case but one, there was one month we used Formula One data, just as a break and a chance to kind of look at something popular and see what people would do with that data. But for all other 16 challenges, they have mimicked actual business situations, and in many cases been actual business situations, just with masked data. And in the case of the current one we have now, which is an environmental challenge, there's actually a real life client. That is real life data. It is not even masked. It's actual data. And so basically you are in the position of a consultant, of a data analyst, data scientist, and they're saying, okay, what are you seeing in this data, and what are your recommendations for what we should do? And in this case, it's really focused on visualization. What are the trends, and how should we represent that? And in many cases, it's, what do we actually think? What do you think the business should do? Or what are actions we should take? And those sorts of real world situations and challenges are perfect for building your portfolio, because You may not be able to use actual reports from your job because of confidentiality and sensitivity issues, but for the challenges, all that data is either public or it's masked. And so publish the web is fine. Posting those publicly is encouraged. And we, instead of asking for just a screenshot, what we look for is a full report that incorporates your UI, UX designs, is basically what you would provide to a real life client who asks for a report. And so in presenting that in your portfolio, that is going to give a prospective employer or client a really good picture of your capabilities. And one of the things we really want to do, and we're working on right now, is a challenge portal where you will be able to basically every month when did you participate, you can just upload your report to that portfolio under your name. You can publish that portfolio, to your LinkedIn page, to, use it on a resume, send it through social media. And our goal here is to allow you not only to post challenge entries, but to post other non-challenge analyses you've done that you want to use to round out your portfolio. And so, seeing this is such a critical aspect of building your career, it's something we really want to help everybody do and provide that capability. So within the next few months, hopefully you'll be seeing that portal, and we'll be talking a lot about that. And if you're on the hiring manager side, there's a real lesson here, which is the best predictor of how somebody's going to do on a job or perform on a job requirement is to make them do that task and evaluate how they do. So if you're looking to hire a Power BI developer, the best predictor is how well do they develop Power BI reports. If you're looking for, a really great communicator, it's how well do they communicate, a 20-minute presentation to a non-expert audience. And so the more you can make your hiring process about the capabilities you're actually trying to hire, the better predictor you're going to have, and the better suited your candidates are going to be to that position. So I wanted to show you just an example portfolio, and this is a portfolio from Zoe Douglas, who is an enterprise DNA expert, an absolutely phenomenal report designer. She actually just won the Maven Data Challenge, and has won pretty much every challenge out there. Develops beautiful reports, really actionable reports that are clear, that are insightful, that are easy to use, great user experience. And so, excuse me, she's put together a really nice portfolio of her work. And in that portfolio, I put the address here. You can go to it. You can basically go to the publish the web examples of her reports. You can play around with those. And again, from the standpoint of a hiring manager, she doesn't need to tell me anything about her Power BI report development skills. 3 minutes of looking at this portfolio, I know this is somebody really talented. I don't, certainly you always want to interview people, but there's not much more I need to know that I won't learn from watching, basically playing with what's on this portfolio for 5 minutes. So the next thing is professional network. And one of the really key points here is, like financial investing, you always, when people talk about investing in retirement, you always get the example of, the person who starts at age 23 and contributes for 10 years and stops, versus the person who starts late and contributes for 20 years after that. And the person who starts early is always going to be better off from an investing standpoint. And the same thing is true from a network an engagement standpoint, that the earlier you engage and develop that network, the better off you're going to be in terms of both opportunity. And what I have here is the ability to magnify your effectiveness and resolve roadblocks for yourself and others over time. And what this is something my dad, who is CEO of a large company, told me early in my career, is that there will come a point in your career, if you've invested in building a good network, where you can just call people up with, on the phone or send an email, and you can resolve problems that, kind of cut through the noise, and, maybe things that were longstanding problems for days or weeks. And you can do that because there comes a point in your career, probably in your late 30s to your 50s, where the people you came up through the system with, whether it's in school or kind of early in your careers, and the people you networked with early, you rise through the organization and through your career, they do the same. And so people that are just kind of your peers and cohorts become very accomplished, very powerful, and you can just tap that network and resolve things, and with people who to you are just friends and, coworkers, but to other people are people they would not have access to. And I found this myself over time, that there's about a 10-year period where you really have the ability to do this and to really magnify your effectiveness, because your peer group has that power and capability, and they haven't started retiring yet. And so you get a only kind of a time limited run in this. But the other thing about it is, that building that network is not just kind of what they can do for you, and the opportunities they can provide, but really it's just a great source of learning, of energy. There's something really powerful that comes from working with people in the same field, sharing that same passion. I talked about kind of why people love data careers, and um, kind of sharing that with people who feel similarly is very energizing, and, is one of the things that I've found to be, really motivating, even in difficult times. And so, one of the tips I have for building your network is, more and more you see kind of opportunities for community of practice. And I was just talking to somebody yesterday, kind of new in my network, who has built this remarkable community of practice within their organization, with data analysts, data scientists, and basically they run internal seminars, they have presentations, they have kind of problem solving sessions, um, and it's all internal, and it's something you would normally have to go, to a user group or, an online forum, but they do it internally. And the beauty of that is that they're not only relating on the technical issues, but they've also got the same commonality of understanding of the business knowledge, and that is really powerful. And so if you have that opportunity, that is gold. And there's a great Analytic Mind podcast that Sam Mackay, our CEO and founder, did with the head of analytics from Truist Bank, used to be SunTrust. It's a big bank in the US. And he had developed a very similar analytics community of practice. And it's a really good discussion, both about what it's like to participate in that sort of thing, and also from the management side, what it takes to build that sort of community of practice. So if you have that open to you, if you have the type of leadership training cohort, where they take people in data careers and give them leadership opportunity and training. I was just talking to another person in my network who works for a large company, and they do kind of early career data leadership training, and they've got 800 people in their organization who are somehow involved in analytics, and they take and run, kind of annual training cohorts to build those networks within those data professionals. And it's a remarkable program, and I think hugely beneficial for the people participating, but also for the organization. But if you don't have that available to you, there's a wealth of opportunities to get involved in those communities of practice. There are analytics user groups, professional conferences, online forums, and I would really just encourage you to find one that's geared to your interest, that is comfortable to you, and really engage, because the payoff is huge. LinkedIn is something, I've never been a big social media user, but for my current position, it's really important. And I've actually found it to be a much better resource and more enjoyable than I expected, and really great for building your network, for engagement. And I particularly want to shout out a guy named Albert Bellamy, who is a former active duty Marine, who is also a data analyst. And he has kind of cracked the algorithm for LinkedIn in terms of maximizing followers and engagement with content. He built a network of over 10,000 followers in a year, and part of that is because he just has really valuable content. But part of it is he's also figured out how to do it, and he runs this thing called the LinkedIn Hard Mode Challenge, which is a 30-day challenge. I'm just on day 2 of it, and it is really valuable in terms of building your network and learning how to use the resources of LinkedIn for engagement and network building. So definitely recommend taking a look at that. One of the other things that I've found over the years is I've heard the incredible power of a free lunch, which is, there have been a lot of people I've come across who are doing just really interesting work or have built an interesting career in the data field somehow. And I've just called them up or sent them an email and say, hey, I'm really fascinated by what you've done. Can I buy you lunch and we can just talk about, kind of how you came to that, how you implemented it, what that experience has been like, what advice you can offer to somebody who, wants to do something similar. And I've done that dozens of times, and I've never been turned down. That people, people like a free lunch, but they also, if you love what you do and are invested in it, you're happy to talk about it. And I found people in this field are incredibly generous in sharing their knowledge and expertise. And so if you give people the opportunity to talk about what they do and to share their passion for it, they will do it. And you can learn a tremendous amount from that. And the last thing I'll say on professional network is, always be thinking about how to create value for the people in your network. And the biggest thing I found is share your work. That every time I would come up with what I thought was an interesting analysis or a technical protocol or something I thought would be valuable for the people in my circle, I would send it around and just say, hey, for those interested, this is something that's working well for us. Feel free to use it if it works for you, ignore it if it doesn't. And it was amazing how much of, kind of great relations I was able to build just by sharing that information. And sometimes it would be, just building a stronger relationship with the person. Sometimes they would respond in kind and say, hey, I've done something similar. Here's what I've done. Or they would take what I did and say, hey, that's really cool, but have you thought about this? Or have you tried this sort of analysis that I think would improve what you've done? And so, always be thinking of, what can you share, kind of drop that pride of ownership and, get your work out there. And I think, always be kind of focused on that value creation. And I think it will magnify and come back to you, with interest. in terms of the value that you get out of doing it. 6 through 8 is related to your network. It's mentors, coaches, and what I call truth tellers. And these are very different things that I think get confused and kind of lumped together in ways where people think these are kind of the same thing, and they're not. And I think it's not a semantic thing, but they're very, very different purposes between mentors, coaches, and then this last group. I call them truth tellers. It may be peer coaches or sounding boards or whatever you want to call it. But the three are really, the first is mentors, and these are people who have achieved the career that you want, that do the job in a way you really respect and are willing to help you achieve what they've achieved, or in some case, more. And these people are absolutely essential in terms of, nobody does this alone, and that everybody who succeeds in this field does so with the help of many other people along the way. And I think one of the things about mentors is they will recognize, the great mentors will recognize the way they've been helped along the way, and that the only real way to pay that back is to do the same for other people when they're in the position to do so. And so again, I've had people really, go to great lengths to, help my career and my development in ways that they didn't have to do. And, we're just incredibly generous, and, kind of finding those people. And again, that power of the free lunch it works not just on technical people, but it works on mentors beautifully. If you go to somebody and say, "Hey, I really respect the way you do your job. You've achieved things that I want to achieve. Would you be willing to sit and talk with me about that?" Again, I've never heard a no to that question. Coaches, on the other hand, are very different. These are people with really high technical proficiency in areas where you want to improve your skills. And these may be mentors, are people who are ahead of you. That these are people who've been where you've been and have achieved more at that point in their career. Coaches may be people at your level. It may be people below your level. It may be people above your level. They just happen to have a skill that you need to do your job better. And that's a big difference between mentor and coach. Is mentor is about your career, coach is about your job. And I have a friend named Paul who always talks about the difference between leadership and management. And again, those are two things that get conflated. And he talks about leadership as doing the right things, and management is doing things right. And mentoring versus coaching has a very similar analogy, which is mentoring is doing the right things for your career. Coaching is doing your job right, or doing your job better. And while there may be overlap, those are often very different people. And the third group are even different from those, in that, as I say, as an analyst, you are definitely going to get to the point at times where you are deep in the weeds and lose perspective on your own work. And this frankly happens to me a lot. And even on the data challenges, I get wrapped up in those, and I will go a mile deep, and then I'm like, I don't even know if this is good. I don't know if the analysis is good, and I don't know, even if I think the analysis is good, is anybody going to understand what I've done and be able to put that into actionable recommendations. And so it's absolutely critical to have people in your circle who you trust, and they trust you, that you can hand them something like that, and they can tell you, this is crap, this is not good, and here's why it's not good. And that you will trust that, you will take that, to heart. And the other thing that's really valuable about that is the negative inference, which is if your small group of truth tellers is not telling you something is bad, then you can be certain that it's pretty good. Because if they see something where you're going off course, they're the group that will tell you. And it's hard to find. It takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of trust to build that relationship. And I've been very fortunate to have 2 or 3 people throughout my career who I've built that relationship with, and they will tell me when I'm off course, and in no uncertain terms. And that is remarkably valuable and really something I think you should think about building. And the key is to build it early, because the higher you rise, the harder it is to find people who are going to really tell you the truth about your own work. And so the earlier you build that, the better. This is just a table I put together that lays out the differences between these 3 groups. I'm not going to go through it. I think I've talked through a lot of it already. But I think it's valuable just in terms of thinking about, for your career, you're going to need people in each of these boxes. And in order to do that, you need to understand the difference between them. And so, take a look at this chart and think about who are the people in your life and your career that meet these criteria and are filling those needs for you. And if you don't have people in those boxes, it's really, I think, something to kind of put on the list of an effort to make to find people. Because I think if you're really interested in advancing in any career, you've always got to have people in one of those, each of those 3 boxes. So number 9 is formal credentials. And I put it here kind of because I have to, not because I think it's valuable. In most cases, I think formal credentials are extremely overrated. I think they are lazy predictors of future performance. Oftentimes, I think they're a better test of whether you're a good test taker than whether you have actual capabilities. And one of the things about credentials is, for the most part, they focus on technical capabilities, not business knowledge nor communication skills. So if you think of that 3-legged stool, if you're only testing one of those things, you're not getting a full enough picture to really be valuable. And in my view, the best organizations really focus on capabilities, not credentials. I was 30 years in an organization, the U.S. federal government, that was very highly tied to credentials. And I understand why, in terms of issues of fairness and equity, but at the same time, it really limited the candidates we had. And there were a lot of people who would have been excellent in those positions who never got considered because they didn't meet those threshold credentials. And, for example, in the positions that I was in data analysis, it required a master's degree. And if you didn't have a master's degree, no matter how good you were, no matter how good your portfolio was, your resume would not even be considered and passed along. And I think that's a real loss. That really, to me, the key is capability, not credential. And so when we built the Enterprise DNA certification, we really built it around, it has a test component. It's one of the 3 components. And the only reason it's in there is because employers expect it to be there. I don't think we think it's valuable. I certainly don't. But the 2 parts of it that are valuable is demonstrated capabilities in the data challenges and practical problem solving in the user forums. And this gets to the kind of fighting in different styles, looking and seeing, okay, how can somebody in, the financial world, how do they do when they're looking at forum problems on logistics data or on um, epidemiological data or environmental data. How good are their general problem solving skills? Not just do they have specific credentials, but the recognition is that credentials are still often the price of admission for consideration. That some places won't look at you unless you have a DA 100 certification. Others won't look at you unless you have a master's degree in a statistical or data science related field. And that gets back to my earlier point about knowing where you want to go. That if where you want to go is something that requires that credential, then that's the price of admission you have to pay. And if you want to do that, then you're going to have to go get that credential. But if you're not looking toward one of those positions that requires that formal credential for consideration, I would really take a critical look at whether or not you want to invest the time and money, because if it's not needed, I think time is better spent developing capabilities. But others may disagree. But I think it's worth being skeptical as to the value of credentials. And quite honestly, with the price of college education now, I think a reasonable question is, is it worth $200,000 to get a college education, or could you take a fraction of that money and, from a data analyst standpoint, develop much better skills, through other means of training and other means of gaining experience in the field? And I think that's a very reasonable question. I'm not going to say one or the other, but I think there's a reasonable debate to be had that I think maybe 10 years ago would not have been a close call at all. And then number 10 is reputation for helping others. And I put this in here because the data field is far too expansive, complex, and constantly changing for any one person to succeed on their own. It's not like being an author or a job where you can kind of be on your own and solve the problems you need to solve solely within your own capabilities. That it is just constantly expanding. And as being part of the enterprise DNA expert team, one of the things that's always a reminder to me is the number of times during the day that people on our expert channel will ask questions of each other. And these are some of the most highly skilled people I've ever met, and incredibly accomplished. And these questions indicate there's no one person who knows even close to all that they need to know. That it takes about a combination of about 20 people on our team to answer all the questions we need to answer. And so data is absolutely a team sport, and the people who are most highly valued in this field are great teammates and people who recognize that the community plays a huge role in their success. And by going out of your way to help others, to share your expertise and knowledge, whether that's technical knowledge or business knowledge or communication skills or whatever that is, if there are tools you've built, if you're a content creator and you're talented that way, the ways in which you help others really signals that you understand this team aspect. And I will just say that if you build that reputation, really keep that focus, good things will happen for you. I think everybody who I've met in the community who is active and is generous in terms of contributing their time, their expertise, really pays off. And just both in terms of direct payoff and also just in terms of it being a very satisfying way to spend your career. And I'll speak to my situation, which is the current position I'm in is I will say, and I've had a wonderful career and done a lot of interesting stuff. The the job I'm in now with Enterprise DNA is the most fascinating job I've had, and I got it entirely as a result of volunteering on the user forum. That I was trying to build my own skills. I answered some questions. Sam Mackay, the CEO, happened to see some responses. Um, contacted me. We got to be friends. Um, and one thing led to another, and that's where this job came from. And it all happened just because I was out in the community just trying to do my best to help. And I'm not pointing to my situation as anything special, because I think everybody who's out in the community doing that can point to a way in which it's really paid off for them and for others. And so, I think it's something that just kind of keeps the community vibrant, and I think will really be something that, if you're not actively involved yet, you'll find it to be a real boost both to your career and just your overall job and life satisfaction. Um, so in closing, you've chosen a magical profession here that I am constantly impressed and reminded that the people who do this for a living all seem happy. I've never met anybody who is involved in data analytics who's like, I hate this job. And I've met a lot of people over the years who hate their job, but not one in this profession. And I think that's pretty magical, and it will give you opportunities that you can't imagine. It will give you entree into fascinating ideas, kind of the glimpse of that data generating process. And I wish you the best success in that. And so in summary, as I've talked about, always focus on building toward your end goals. Work every day for just a little tangible improvement in your tech skills, your business knowledge, or your communication skills. I have a post today on LinkedIn about, that very thing, kind of micro loading, and, just putting a little bit more weight on the bar every day. And it's barely noticeable, but over the course of weeks, months, and years, you can gain enormous skills and accomplishments just by kind of small progress applied diligently over a long period. Grow in the community, focus on giving back to it. And I think you will at some point have the opportunity to share the lessons learned of your great career. And as I say, I wish you the best along the way. If I can help in that journey in any way, please let me know. I'm always happy to connect on LinkedIn. That's a great way to reach me. I'm also constantly on the Enterprise DNA forum. I'm just at Brian J on that. And so I hope you found that helpful. I hope there's been at least something you can use in that to kind of help boost your path along the way. And at this point, what I want to do is just turn it over and take any questions. If you've got points you want to raise, if there are things I've said you want to disagree with, I'm always happy to hear alternative viewpoints. So let me. Okay, I don't see anybody. Okay, so Balaji, thank you very much. I hope that was helpful, and appreciate your support on LinkedIn. I always enjoy your comments and interactions. Thank you, Helen. Yeah, I've had the good fortune of a lot of very wise people kind of crossing my paths over the years and providing great advice that has turned me in the right direction. And whether it's Professor Stern or Professor Wood or, many, many others. There's a great story about my powerlifting coach on LinkedIn today and the things I learned from him. And, just been very fortunate to, cross paths with these people. And, as I say, there are just lots of people out there who are eager to help and to share that wisdom, with you. And so a lot of it is just, reaching out to them and just, listening with open ears. Other questions, comments? Let me just kind of scroll through the chat because I don't see that. I don't see that chat when I've got Christian, Zoe, Medi. Okay, great. A lot of familiar faces. Okay. Well, that's wonderful. Any other questions or comments? We'll make this presentation available. I know typically I don't like to have a ton of text on a PowerPoint. I certainly don't want to read it, but I put it together that way just because I wanted to have it as a takeaway you could use and kind of refer back to. So as I say, we'll make that available, with a link possibly on the forum that you can download to, and we'll put that on YouTube in the comment section. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody taking an hour plus of time. I know you're all busy, and always enjoy these opportunities to interact. And yeah, time to put advice into action. And so again, if I can help in any way, I'm always willing and eager to do that. So hit me up on LinkedIn, and good luck to y'all. That I look forward to hearing your stories as well. Thanks, everybody.